After Hours is brought to you by The Hourglass. The Hourglass, advancing watch culture across Asia Pacific for over 45 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to After Hour. It's pretty good pun there, actually, because see, it's Man of the Hour, and then the show after it is After Hour. We just came up with that together collectively. I want to thank very much our sponsor, which is the Hourglass, also. So it's we're just going to keep the hour theme going on here. And I really want to thank, in particular, Alex and Andy Rosenfield, who, as you can see from the episode, had invited me to be the MC for their launch event in Los Angeles. You can see I struggled a little bit with what to say, but I think I found the right words in the end. But I'll leave you guys, and I say you guys meaning my guests, to tell me whether or not I did a semi-competent job. So first of all, I want to invite Alex Rosenfield to join us. Alex, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Wei, and thank you so much for joining us in LA. We really appreciated your being our MC.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you, sir, for having me. And then, of course, one of the suavest, wittiest, and entertaining guys that I know, Mr. William Massena. You've seen him as a recurring character throughout the entire series. How are you, sir?
Hi, Wei. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind words.
I say these words with a great deal of sincerity. So, Alex, I want to launch first into your background because you come from kind of an unconventional place as a watch CEO. But I actually, and we see this in the episode, you brought a really kind of fresh energy to an industry that sometimes needs a little impulse of power from time to time. So talk to me about where you had your professional life and what were the most important experiences that helped shape your vision that you wanted to bring to Urban Jürgensen.
Yeah, so my background is really in fashion and beauty and marketing and is not sort of from the watch world. And so I think that, like it or not, I bring a bit of an outsider perspective. And I think that it's also a bit of an American perspective. So I think that there's been something that we have found very exciting about the fact that I was not sort of originally a watch geek. I come to watches really as somebody who appreciates the design and the beauty more than I originally appreciated movements and engineering. I've come to appreciate those things, but I think that that's the perspective that we've brought to how we present Urban Jürgensen, which is to be very inclusive of an audience that isn't necessarily all movement geeks or aren't people who come to it from the same watch collecting background, but can find things to appreciate and then can come to appreciate the engineering and can come to appreciate many of the things that are often the focus of how we talk about watches.
Well, as someone who experienced that event firsthand, I think that what you brought to it was absolutely stellar. I mean, first there was the spectacle of this extraordinary event, transforming Santa Monica Airport into Urban Jürgensen's home, at least from the exterior. The warmth of the event, the spectacle that you created, it was just an inclusivity that you created, also this just kind of like relaxed vibe. I mean, you guys even invited us to your home. It was just so engaging. It's very, very unusual for the watch industry for people to be so nice to each other. So we really love that. But at the same time, and I want to ask William this question before I get into his background, it was a really beautiful balance. You have obviously your father, Andy, who I think is one of the most accomplished collectors and therefore has like this extraordinary kind of watch collecting and actually, technical intellect. And then on top of that, of course, you had the, legendary Finnish watchmaker, Kari Voutilainen. So in terms of watchmaking substance, that's there. In terms of the perspective of one of the greatest collectors, you have that. What you brought to it was this really fresh dynamic, the sense of inclusivity, this really wonderful sort of hospitality and visual richness. And I think one of the coolest campaigns I've seen for a long time. So bravo on that, sir. William, what were your thoughts about the launch event?
I absolutely agree with you. I think the key word is one of the words you just said. It was freshness. I think, we come from an industry who has a tendency to repeat itself all the time. And what Alex and his team brought was a lot of freshness into what a watch brand could be or can be. And that's what they did. I think the launch was very much of a prologue of what's to come, I think, in terms of product, in terms of communication, in terms of design.
Absolutely. Okay, now I want to transition into the part where you, as an international man of mystery, describe exactly what it is that you do, sir.
So I own a company called Massena Lab. We mostly make watches with independent watchmakers and small brands all over the world: Italy, France, UK, Switzerland, obviously. Previously, I ran a website called timezone.com. I was the CEO of a company called antiquarium.com, and I've been a watch collector for 40 years this year.
So on the subject of marriage, so I love the fact that you guys had the event in Los Angeles, which is a place that I've come to love. I mean, we touched on this briefly, but as someone that grew up in New York, and William grew up in New York as well, I was raised to detest Los Angeles, right? Like the idea that people always wanted to talk about their feelings, that they want to greet you and ask like semi-personal questions. It was extremely discomforting to me when I first lived out there. But because my wife is from Los Angeles, because I got to see this beautiful city through her eyes and the sheer majestic physical beauty of LA, it's a place that I consider now a second home. So I love that you guys did it in LA, but Alex, why did you do it in LA?
We did it in LA for a couple of reasons. We wanted to do something in a place where people in the watch world don't spend quite as much time. So we didn't want to do it in Geneva. We wanted to do something that again felt fresh. But we also did it in LA really because that's our home. And we wanted to welcome people into our home, into our world. Urban Jürgensen was originally a family company. It was the Jürgensen family company for almost 100 years. And it's in family hands again. And we think that gives it an ability to have slow growth and longevity, and to think about the future, and to build not for quarterly profits, but to build something that is really about building on this Urban Jürgensen legacy. So we see it as a family company, and we wanted to have people to our family home.
That's lovely. And William, I owe you a big thank you because as both of you know, I had my wedding in LA last December. I am one of the luckiest guys on the planet because I've married probably the most incredible woman, at least from my perspective. But I remember William, who has been, and we can get into this later, who's been married more times than anyone else I know. He gave me a very valuable piece of advice. He said, the night before the wedding, your wife is going to be stressed, right? It's not her fault. It's just all brides are going to hit the highest possible anxiety level the night before the wedding. And probably she might be a little bit irritated with you. Knowing you, Wei, she probably will be because you're quite disorganized. So from my experience, what I've learned is get her a really nice gift, all right? Something meaningful, right? And give it to her at that moment where she is, really feeling the stress. And it will completely remind her that this whole moment is about the two of you, right? So, William, first of all, how many times have you been married?
4 times.
Okay.
But 3 times with the same wife, okay?
Okay. So, if you don't mind my asking, William,
yes.
How do you end up marrying the same person 3 times?
Yeah, it's a long story.
Okay. Anyway, I met your wife, and she's wonderful. And I took your advice. So this is my wedding band. I don't know if the viewers can see it, but it's a chrome hearts gold dagger ring with pink sapphires, which is unconventional as a wedding band, but knowing me, it kind of works, right? And basically had the matching pendant. So it's a gold dagger with pink sapphires made for BB. And I gave it to her that evening, just as I was getting yelled at because of course I'd forgotten something. And it was a really wonderful moment because it really reminded both of us, and I just want to put it out there, she was in the right to be yelling at me. My wife is always right. But it just really reminded us that this is a moment about us ultimately and about the bond that we share. And from that point onwards, it was just absolutely beautiful. So William, I have to thank you for your wisdom and your sage advice, sir.
I'm all about the peace of marriage.
Absolutely. Okay. So one of the things that I struggled with in terms of the speech was it's always like you're never sure how to react when you hear that someone very successful from in another industry has purchased one of your favorite watch brands, right? Like you don't know how to react. And there have been historical precedents where it doesn't work out that well, especially, and I don't want to be too controversial here, but when it's like American business people, right? And I say that because, you kind of feel that the American business person will be like, okay, what you need to do is ramp up numbers and do this and, this, and then, and then we're going to sell this thing in 3 years and we're going to make fortunes. You know what I'm saying? And so it was when I first heard that, I was genuinely a little bit concerned. But then when I had the pleasure of going to Andy and Alex's home in LA and listening to them for the first time, I'm like, oh, the motivation is completely different here. So Alex, tell me a little bit about that, please, sir.
Well, it was never Andy's or anybody in our family's ambition to own a watch company. Andy loves watches and is a watch collector and loves Urban Jürgensen and began collecting Urban Jürgensen in the 90s in the Pratt Baumberger era of the watches. And we just sort of found out by chance that the company was in a bit of financial trouble and was ready for a change. And it was less about, wow, we can own a watch company, and more about, this is a company that we love and respect and think deserves another generation of really doing what it had always done, which is representing the best of watchmaking. So being about slow, handcrafted watches, exceptional movement design, and not being about scale, not being about quick growth and doing numbers and becoming pervasive, but really about representing what the company had represented in 1773 and again in 1990. And it was just a fluke that we ended up with this company. And I think that because of Andy's love of collecting watches and his love of watches, that has guided everything we did. And then, of course, the next thing we did after buying the company was asking Kari if he would join us. And we're tremendously, tremendously lucky that he did. I think that having the watchmaking led by one of the great watchmakers set us up to build watches that have real quality, and the sales, the marketing, the branding is all around something that is itself quite exceptionally designed.
So William, I want to discuss this with you as well, because there have been instances in other industries where you have a very compassionate and motivated new purchaser come in because they want to safeguard a brand, right? And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So one of them is Xiaofei, my favorite shirt maker, who is, I think they just did a collaboration with Chanel, I want to say. Is that correct, right? And the Colbin family basically bought Charvet because it was going to fall into, I think it was a fund from overseas or something like that. And basically the French president spoke to Denis Colbin, who was one of the cloth suppliers. Monsieur Colbin, who's I think it was Denis Colbin actually. And he said, listen, we need to find a buyer for this company that's French. So because this is part of our cultural heritage. And he said, well, how about me and my family? And they took that over. Similarly, there's the Roland family that bought Anderson and Shepherd as well, which is one of Savile Row's most storied tailors. And both of those families have done a pretty extraordinary job in terms of continuity. So much so that, over the history that they've had, you've seen these two brands, flourish in a way that they probably wouldn't have had if they was still within the original family. So, from your perspective also, I think obviously the big example we have in watchmaking is the Stern family and their purchasing of Patek Philippe in the earliest part of the 20th century. But why do you think, what are the characteristics that you think create a family that's going to come in and take over a brand and keep it for the long term and achieve really an extraordinary level of excellence?
So the Charvet story goes,
Right.
it was General de Gaulle, the French president, and he was Denis' father, and it was in 1966. So yeah, the story goes that it was going to be Americans that were going to buy it, and de Gaulle hated America so much that he basically begged anybody to buy it, and the Colbin family stepped in.
It was Americans.
I'm not
also,
so sure
actually,
about the Roland and Anderson Shepherd, but
I'm sorry, Alex. We're not.
it was. so well, in this case, we can say that there was after Dr. Kroth sold the company first to people from Denmark, and it didn't go so well. I think it was more of a tax operation, maybe, or corporate reinvestment, but it didn't go very well. I think when the Rosenfield family step in, you're looking at something that is a much more less of an idea of scalability. There's one thing I remember when Andy got over the company, he was telling me everything had been conceived from the Danes as a huge operation. The size of the atelier, the size of the software used, everything was in a scale that was far away big in terms of what the capacity of the company was at the time. So with the Rosenfield coming back, I think it's more of a family affair, as we mentioned, and I think it's more of a human scale. I don't think there's a need here to go and make 10,000 watches tomorrow to distribute among 300 stores. It might happen, but it might be like the Stern and Patek. It may take 100 years for this to happen. And I think this is what's important here for Urban Jürgensen or any of those companies is the ambition exists. You want to preserve the company. You want to make sure that it thrives, but you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to go above the limitation of what a luxury company, what artisanal craftsmanship makes. And I think that this is what's very important to Alex and the Urban Jürgensen family company.
Well, I think that brings up the subject of the watches themselves, right? Because, you can have the best intentions conceivable. You can have the best marketing strategy. You can have, a world-class photographer. But if fundamentally the timepieces themselves are not stellar, it's not going to work, right? And I have to say, I was really blown away by the first time those watches were presented to me. I love all three of them. But as you guys know very well, the UJ1, the 250th anniversary watch, this wristwatch, which incorporates a fundamental part of the contemporary history of Urban Jürgensen, which is the Derek Pratt rouleau triangle, remontoir d'égalité, coaxial to the escape wheel, mounted on the tourbillon cage. I mean, my mind was blown. That watch was always a what if someone could possibly do that one day, like I would talk to my friends, yeah, but and the final statement would always be, yeah, but it's probably not possible. And then you made that happen. So, I mean, guys, did you, or Alex, maybe I should ask you this, and how did you guys feel pressured at all to be able to live up to the expectations of all us kind of crazy nerds that
I don't think intimidated is the right word. I think that, we feel incredibly fortunate that Kari is part of the team and part of what we're doing. And I think that, I can speak about the watches taking no credit for having conceived them or made them. That's not my corner of the sky. But I think that we knew Kari had made great watches. I think the other thing we did was we took our time. So our launch was in 2025, but we bought the company in 2021 and there was no timeline on when we would launch. So we wanted to work until we felt the watches were exceptional, until we felt that we had a collection that was ready to present. There was no rush on Kari. There was no rush on the marketing. It was really about taking the time to do it right. And I think that we worked very much internally. So we weren't talking to a lot of people. We weren't getting a lot of opinions. We were so nervous that something would leak. I think that we were more insular than we might have otherwise been. And I think that not having a lot of external opinions and not having a lot of external discussion and not having a timeline alleviated a lot of that pressure and let us work in a way that was a bit more free.
From I do know that you took your time also, as a sort of amusing anecdote. I know you kind of pushed the launch back even 6 months just to get it perfect, because initially you were thinking about doing it around the same time, apparently, as my wedding. and, and I remember.
No, we rescheduled it to not be during your wedding, Wei. It was completely for you.
Well, I remember Marine Lemonnier calling me up and going, "What day is your wedding in LA?" And I was like, "It's on the 8th." She's like, "So would you be available to MC an event the day before?" And I was like, but I love Marine Lemonnier. She's one of the most dynamic people that I know in the industry. But I thought that was great. From a historical perspective, if you're a watch nerd like myself and you look at these timepieces, they are just resonating with so many kind of cool, like, clin d'oeils or like tips of the hat to different parts of the history. So we talked about the UJ1. We talked about the fact that it's using Derek Pratt's Le Montois on the cage that we see it like in the oval pocket watch, for example. Actually, the architecture is very much from the oval pocket watch with the flying tourbillon and flying barrel. But William, if you look at the UJ2 and UJ3, it's so cool. You've got like a Jules Jürgensen reference there in terms of architecture. You've got a natural escapement, which I think is a tip of the hat also to the fact that both Jürgen Jürgensen and Urban knew Abraham Louis Breguet. I mean, you're probably one of the greatest watch experts I know. From a critical perspective, like, was there anything that they missed, or did they just nail it?
So there's a French word I love, which is clin d'oeil, which basically is Easter eggs. I mean, that would be, I think, the best translation in English, Easter egg. But I prefer the French word, which is basically a wink of the eye, clin d'oeil. And I think the watch is full of wink of the eye. All three of them, actually. You have a lot of references without having a copy of what has been done. It's all a little bit of things of the past that are put together very nicely with a lot of taste, and without the user to be overwhelmed by history or anything like this. It's more about a connoisseur knowing the past will find the references in certain little details on the watch. And you can see a lot of the history of Urban Jürgensen. You can see the early years, as you mentioned, Wei, with Urban and Jürgen. You can see Derek Pratt. You can see Baumgartner. You can see the Comte de Vache, but it's all done very differently on the watch. And as you mentioned, the natural escapement is a very nice technical aspect of the watch that you don't really see often. The double balancier is also very nice. There's all those little references there and there on all three watches that are there for you to appreciate on its own, but also for you to appreciate within a historical context. And I think that's what's so wonderful about this collection.
I think that there was really on Kari's part a goal to honor the past without repeating it. And so I think you do see these sort of Easter eggs or winks to the past where elements of what were sort of the highlights of the Urban Jürgensen 250 plus years of history, elements from it, but doing things that are new and that move the ball forward and are fresh. So that was really, I think, what Kari was trying to do.
At the same time, I think you have to sometimes resist the urge as I say new brand, but a brand that is really doing its first major historic relaunch, to kind of just make it overwhelming. You know what I mean, right? And sometimes when you see watches like that, it's kind of the equivalent of someone that's wearing like every piece of jewelry that they own, and it's just too much. Like your eye doesn't even know where to go. And I think each of the timepieces has a really nice singularity to it. I also feel that watches that you really love are watches where you discover something new about them progressively, day by day, week by week, year upon year, and the subtlety with which they were executed. Even the quality of the guilloche. From Brabeck, the interesting sort of like positioning of these teardrop lugs so that they're turned on their side, and then of course the extraordinary finishing that you see in the watches. They're watches that I feel are engineered to grow on you over time, right?
Yeah, I think that they're watches that are made not to wow you with flash, but to really have intrinsic quality. And I think that the idea is that it's a joy to wear a watch like that, and that the wearer feels the hand making that goes into it and sort of experiences all of those elements over time. I think even if you look at the UJ1, that beautiful movement design, you really only see from the movement side. The tourbillon is on the back, on the UJ3, the leap year indicators on the back. There are all of these things that the engine turning on the reverse side. I think that there are so many pieces that are meant to really be private moments of joy for the wearer.
I like the way how you put that as private moments of joy. Okay, so I happen to notice that you are shortlisted in a couple of categories at the Geneva Grand Prix. And I know you're headed there. I think you mentioned you and Andy are actually even taking a table at the GPHG. And I have to say, it's really nice to see how much you guys are kind of putting into contributing to the watch industry in your own ways. How meaningful would it be to you guys to win at the GPHG in any of the categories?
I think it would mean a tremendous amount. I think that, as I've said, we're outsiders to the watch industry. We're Americans. And I think we've been really overwhelmed with how welcoming and kind the watch world has been to us. And our inclusion in 3 nominations at the GPHG is just an incredible honor that we're tremendously grateful for.
William, you have actually won a GPHG, or I think maybe a couple of GPHG awards. What is that what is that experience like as someone that's put kind of like everything into their creations?
The GPHG is really about the team. There's no question that it's a reward for the team. And you learn this when you get it, that, the people that have worked on the watch, that have worked on the marketing, that have worked on the sales, feel very much rewarded that the industry recognizes their work. For sure, I was the one on the stand with Sylvain Pinault, and we received the prize. But I could see very much that it was the people that worked with Sylvain, it was the people that worked with me that were the proudest of the moment. And that's kind of what it's all about.
That's really lovely. One of the things that resonated most with me about the episode was this idea of a father and son, And Alex, I know Andy had mentioned that when he was younger, he was very focused on building up his business, or businesses, I should say, which apparently went pretty well for him, from what I understand, right? And then later, when he had this opportunity, or this opportunity came up, he kind of thought, this could be something that I could do with my children. And that was something very different. It was something that was very appealing to him because of that. What was it like when he proposed his business to you?
It was a bit of a surprise. I think that I was staying with him for a bit during COVID, and it's when he began discussing it. So from the earliest calls, we were speaking to the previous owners together, but I don't think I knew what it would mean to work on this together and how involved we would both become in it. It's been wonderful working together. It's just a really interesting experience. And I think, as I think we talked about, work has always been such a focus of his life, but it's always been separate from family. But for now to be part of that and see him at work and get to share that part of his life, it's been really rewarding.
That's really extraordinary. As someone who is just recently married and hopes to have children, hopefully one day, I couldn't think of anything cooler than to do something I'm truly passionate about and actually do it with one of my kids. So I think that's one of the things that I found really touching about getting to know the two of you. And I had wanted to mention that also in the presentation, or as an MC, right? And this idea that I know that your motivation is not immediate. It's not even an immediate commercial return. It may not even be commercial. It's certainly excellence, because I know you want to achieve that, right? But it's also about perenniality. It's about really putting down roots for Urban Jürgensen that will, 20 years, 50 years, potentially 100 years from now, people will look back and say, it was great because these guys put it back on track and they kept it there, right? And are you guys conscious of this kind of responsibility?
Very much so. I think that it's not really about the credit, but it's about building something that has longevity and that is not built to be fast and about flash, but that's really about establishing standards of quality values for this company, reviving, the values that have existed in the company for 250 years, but making that the core of what we're doing to build something that is built to last another 250 years. And that I think sometimes, we were talking a little bit at the beginning about what happens when an American family of investors buys a company. And I think often the problem is you have somebody buying it with like a private equity mentality, which is, a 10-year turnaround and a horizon to sell it. And that's just the opposite of what we're doing. We bought the company with the intention for our family to continue to own and hold this company for generations. And every decision we make is about how do we build this slowly and with quality that will last.
Well, that's really wonderful to hear. Your brother is working now in the company too. Is that correct?
He is, yes. And it's very fun because I have 3 siblings and everybody's involved, whether they're working for the company or not. My mother's been incredibly involved. They were sort of sounding boards early, and there's just a wonderful sense of family togetherness within what we're working on.
Well, on the subject of your incredible mom, we have to shout out the way she rocked the Urban Jürgensen pocket watch at the launch event. I mean, she
not
basically
too Flavor Flav for you.
Well, William and I are old enough to get the Flavor reference because we were around when Public Enemy was just coming out. I loved it, and I not everyone can pull it off, but she just has like this kind of like irreverent and very cool attitude towards it, and it really worked. William, let me ask you a question as well. How did you get to know Andy and then subsequently Alex? And talk to me also about Andy's intellect as a watch collector, because that was something I was really blown away by.
So I met Andy. Well, Andy has been a collector for many years, but I met Andy when he started buying the watches that Massena Lab creates, and we became fast friends. So that was right before COVID, and then we started talking maybe once a week. He will call me, or I will call him, or we'll have a lunch in New York, and that's basically how we started talking all the time. And Andy has a very, very deep knowledge of independent watchmakers. He was buying things from watchmakers way before anybody else was. And example, Rick Sheppy, and he's one of his earliest clients. And we are talking years before any of Rick Shepp's work was recognized by collectors and others. I mean, the list is very long. Andy has, I think, a watch from everybody, if not 10 watch from everybody. And the more interesting thing here, it's not so much the quantity of watches, but it's more the intellectual curiosity about each and every one of these watches. A lot of people buy watches, they put them in the box, and then they forget about it. But Andy is not like that. Andy is really much into the complication and what it does, and the way the complication was, created, and the difference between the construction of different complication. We're seeing this with the tourbillon, the Urban Jürgensen. So Andy always calls me up and he says, I just received this. Do you know that he did that? And we start talking an hour about so-and-so watchmakers. And he shows me the amazement that he has for a lot of those watches. I mean, it's nearly like a child who just got a new toy and want to share with another child how great his new toy is. In certain ways, it's very scary because he's spreading the word and the gospel for all those watchmakers to people that don't have his wallet. So you hang up and you're like, oh, I wish I had that watch, but you more than often you cannot afford it, or the wait list is very, very long. But Andy is keen to share. Actually, he lets me wear his watches. And for this, I'm very thankful. But yes, I think Andy and I a few times had conversation about what if we own this watch brand, what will we do with it? Until he bought Urban Jürgensen, and now he can do a reality of some of the dreams he was telling me about.
Well, that's incredibly cool to hear. Well, first of all, I've never heard anything but like praise or kind remarks related to Andy, and that also already, this is the watch community is a small one, so it's always nice when you have that. The second thing was I noticed that Rajab and Annabelle actually came out for the launch event, and Rajab is a very busy guy, right? And when I just asked him like, oh, it's cool to see you out here, he also said that Andy was so supportive of him at a time when it was really tough, when he was struggling. And he said that it's people like Andy that basically, kept him afloat during the most challenging periods. And he feels, I don't want to say gratitude, he feels a friendship that's incredibly sincere. And I love it when people take their friendships really seriously, right? And so it's a very nice thing to hear. So what was amazing was to have a conversation with Andy, and you're like, did you actually go to Woostep at some point and take a watchmaking class? Because your understanding of this is so profound. You could, at least from a theory perspective, be a watchmaker, right? And I remember when we were talking about whether it was the natural escapement, I think it was also really the UJ1 and the use the creation of this Derek Pratt rouleau triangle remontoir on the tourbillon cage. And I kind of sussed out a little bit that I think that he was the one kind of pushing for that. Now, of course, you have Kari, you need Kari to execute that. But how cool is it that you have a guy that's purchased his brand, he's recruited, a genius watchmaker, and then he's like, this is what we have to do. Because if it was me or anyone that loves Urban Jürgensen and Derek Pratt, you'd be like, do that. And it's like he reached into our minds and extracted like all of our hopes and desires and then made it manifest and showed it to us, and that's what was so cool about that.
Well, I think that Andy just really loves watches. And I a point that he often makes to me, and I'm sure William, you've heard him say this, is that he began collecting these watches from these independent watchmakers. He didn't think that they would ever have any resale value. He never collected anything with the intention of thinking of it as an investment. It was really just out of love of the watchmaking that he became a collector. And then years of learning about it sort of slowly from people like William, from forums before, there were quite as many formalized publications and quite as much chatter about these things. And like you think about Rex, he bought those watches very early because he just thought they were remarkable and new. He loved Kari's watches and bought those, as a relatively early collector of Kari's. I think that it really just stems from a love of watchmaking.
William, I wanted to talk to you about this because this is how you made most of your decisions in terms of watch collecting as well. I kind of miss that very pure era of watch collecting where we bought something, especially an independent watch, and we basically expected to lose our shirts on it. But we couldn't help but be so compelled by it that we're like, you know what? Fuck it. It's just so beautiful, right? And I know you had this moment several times with François-Paul Journe because you were very early in adopting François-Paul Journe. And then when you saw the unveiling of the CC1 as well, you had in The Godfather when Al Pacino falls in love, the lightning bolt, you had the lightning bolt happen to you as well. I mean, do you kind of miss that era where everyone just bought independent watches or watches in general because they love them and not because of the secondary values?
Yeah, because I don't think it's so much only about the watch. I think it's also about the people. That better than even me. You go to dinner with those guys, you're having a good time, you get drunk, and you order a watch, and you're happy. And the next day you wake up and you're still very happy that you ordered the watch, and
yes,
and you're happy that the watch would be made for you, and you're happy you had the guts to ask them to make you a watch. And I think that's the way it used to be. It used to be like this, where you were scared. You were scared that you would get a watch or not, but it was more about the watch and the people, and especially the people. And resale value had no effect. You would buy the watch and wear it and remember that party you had when you ordered it, or the time you spent with that watchmaker. And this is what makes the big difference between independent watchmaking and the big groups. Big groups, you go in the store, you get a free espresso, you look at the watch, and you pull out your credit card. Here you have a relationship, and I think the Urban Jürgensen experience is exactly that. You get a note, you get a follow up on the construction of your watch. A friend of mine just got a little picture of his watch being assembled that I think Alex sent him. It's all about this. It's about the human touch and the relationship more than the totem, the object itself, which obviously has to be nice at the price you're paying. But, I think it's more about the people at the end of the day and the experience.
I totally agree. And, guys, this was really the reason why when, I initially thought about this TV series, I was like, what's the first season going to be about? And this happened kind of, because I've been thinking about this for a long time. It happened way before, independent watchmaking kind of exploded in terms of popularity. But I always said, if I'm going to do a TV series, I want it to be on the independents, or independence as expressed in different ways first. Why? Because I want to tell deeply personal stories, because like every one of these people, and it's interesting because everyone has had success now, but I remember Max, when we did his episode with him, he's like, listen, every one of these people will tell you that it was excruciatingly difficult at times, right? And Recep, for example, didn't sell a watch for almost 3 years, right? And can you imagine like waking up every morning and looking yourself in the mirror and being like, maybe this will be the day, you know what I mean? Everyone struggled, but it's the human relationships, William and Alex, that you're right. They make so much of a difference. I remember one of my favorite moments was when I went to visit De Bethune for the first time, right? It was in Saint Croix, which is one of the most remote parts of Switzerland, where like, I think there's like one cow, right? And then, L'Auberçon is the village in Saint Croix where there's just one cow. Like that's the entire population. And at one point, THA and Denis Flageolet now, right? And I remember we were sitting down for a meal, and because we'd been brought by Michael from the Hourglass, I was with a bunch of other Asian journalists. And so they prepared like a very safe meal, right? And I'm like, this sucks, because this is like my first trip to Switzerland. It was in the middle of summer, it was stinking hot. And I was like, but I want a cheese fondue, And like Denis Flageolet just started laughing, and he's like, you know what? In Switzerland, when we like someone, we don't let them eat a cheese fondue by themselves. So I will have a fondue with you. And ever since that, I've loved that guy. Like I just love that dude, because it's been effortless in terms of friends as well. So I think that from both of your perspective, William as a collector, as an independent watch brand owner, like, do you also feel as if like this was the right way to start the whole season or the whole series with these deeply personal stories? Because I couldn't imagine it otherwise.
Yeah, it's all about that. It's all about the personal relationship you have with people. It's not about the product. You're not here, pushing a watch or a movement. You're here to promote and speak about the people you love. That's what it's all about.
Well, and I think that you see the rise of interest in independent watchmaking. It's not a coincidence. I think that people feel so estranged from things that are human, things that are mechanical, things that are made by hand with a personality. I think that you see people connect. I think that that's very much what people connect to and why there's this renewed interest.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all remember in 2014 when the Apple Watch came out, and there was this real sort of collective fear that sort of spread like wildfire through the Swiss watch industry. Is this going to be our existential crisis? Are we going to face the abyss? And then the strange thing was the millennials and Gen Z fell in love with mechanical watchmaking maybe more than ever. And maybe it's because they're so inundated with technology and digital interface that they, in their souls, compelled them to seek out that which is perennial and tangible. And when you talk about what is tangible, there's nothing more tangible than meeting the guy that owns the brand and shaking his hand and having be your friend. And the same that William, when Andy started buying watches from Massena Lab, he's like, hey, and actually William Massena is my buddy and we talk all the time. I mean, that's really meaningful, And so I hope that for both of you guys as brand owners, it's always important to make that effort. And Alex, I know for you that whole idea of inclusivity has been key to your philosophy.
Yeah, so I think that there's sort of two sides to that. One is being very inclusive of the audience. The other is that in everything we do, we are trying to make sure people whether they come from the watch world and understand the handmaking that goes into a watch like ours, or they are outsiders to the watch world. They're people who love jewelry or decorative arts or fine arts or different things. That we communicate some of these values. So William mentioned the pictures. We send every client an update of pictures of their watch actually on the watchmaker's workbench being assembled. And those aren't stock pictures. Those are your exact watch, the dial before it goes into the case, or the movement as they're assembling it. Because we think that the more we can build this connection between how human a watch is and how each watch is unique and different, and the engineering is incredibly precise, but no two are identical because it's all about a human touch. I think the more we can communicate that to people, the more they can understand what's really special and remarkable and about the watches that we and other independents make. And I think you feel that when you wear them. And we hope as a company to put a lot of effort into communicating that.
Well, one recent convert to Urban Jürgensen is Timothy Chalamet. I have to bring this up because it was blowing up all over social media. Alex, how did that happen, and how did he connect with the watches?
It happened incredibly organically. He contacted us. He had heard about what we were working on. His team reached out. He wanted to see the watches, and we showed them to him, and he tried them on. And I think that, I certainly can't speak for him, but I think he cares tremendously about his craft, and he cares tremendously about creativity. And I think the fact that those values are so present in what we're doing and in the watches, I think that he felt that just putting them on. He came over to Andy's house in LA, and we showed him the watches. And it was, I think, just an emotional connection. And it's that same emotional connection you get from the humanity of the watches. I think that he felt that, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that like somehow there's a very nice connection there. You can always tell when someone's wearing something because like they've been paid to. You know what I mean? Right? And we see that, I guess, because watches have become so popular. And maybe William, it's a question for you. It seems like there's not like a red carpet event or sporting event or musical moment that happens where, in some ways or another, watches are not kind of center stage. I think it's super important, I guess, for the growth of our industry and for the continuity to also connect with the next generation. But, from your perspective, William, especially as a connoisseur, but also the person that owns the brand, how do you distinguish what is quality like communication as opposed to just like, the chaos of social media?
Oh, that's a very tricky question. Public awareness on watches is very recent. I think that for many, many years, watch collectors, watch lovers could hide in plain sight because nobody really cared what was on our wrist. I think this changed a lot. I would say it started changing with Richard Mille and a lot of the sportsmen that were rocking the Richard Mille, the F1 drivers and the Nadal of this world. And now there's a certain public awareness about who is wearing what, as in 20 years ago, who's driving what. And it's very difficult for people in general to know what's true and what's fake. And I think in the case of Timothy Chalamet, it's not exactly like Urban Jürgensen is the most known watch in the world. And from a guy who is very much looked upon by everybody, social media and media, and, because of his relationship, because of the movie he makes, because of all of this, taking the time to wear Urban Jürgensen is definitely a very interesting perspective, because this is not the watch that you would think of when you think of Timothy Chalamet. I mean, I wasn't. I was a bit shocked, like everybody else, when I saw that picture or those
Absolutely
pictures.
Same.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was like, what?
So
How did you hear about this? So, it's very interesting how the product reach is right now when you look at it. It's very fresh. Again, I'm going to reuse that word, but I was not expecting this, and I don't think anybody was expecting this. and it would be interesting to see what's next.
So one thing that I find very interesting is that if your profession is to create emotion in others, right, as an actor, what is it that gives you emotion? That's interesting to me, you know. And one mutual friend of ours who is, I would say, one of the most successful artists contemporary artists of the moment is Wes Lang, right? And I know that, you know, he met with you, Alex, and Andy, and he fell in love with watches, which we have, you know, as part of the episode as well. I mean, what does it mean to you that, like, you know, a really sought after contemporary artist like him is saying, this gives me emotion?
It's incredibly gratifying. I think that one of the sort of specific most fun things is that he looked at he particularly loves the UJ2 in rose gold and blue. And he looked at the dial and he said, I know exactly this pigment color. I paint with this color. I can't believe that Kari was able to make it look good on a watch. But I think it's that sort of hyper specific awareness and understanding and attention to detail. He's become a friend of ours and a friend of the company's. It's really Wei, you introduced us to him. But he loves craftsmanship. He loves great watchmaking. I think these values that are so core to what we're doing, it's the same thing that spoke to Timmy, that spoke to Wes, which is something that's made carefully, with love, with precision, in the pursuit of doing it perfectly, but understanding that it's human and taking joy in doing that. I think that somebody who cares about art, who cares about craft, I think that those are just sort of shared values.
You know, I need to now correct myself for something I said earlier, which was that a lot of times very wealthy people don't have a lot of deep knowledge about watches. Because now that I think about it, I kind of feel it doesn't really matter, right? And we have a discussion about this all the time, Alex, right? Like, what's your entry point into something? The UJ1 is a very technical watch, but I'll give you an analogy. I remember I was at the Foundation Louis Vuitton, and they had a retrospective on Mark Rothko, right? And I'm walking around this, and, you know, you're seeing this entire kind of like creative struggle where he goes from figuratism to abstraction, back to figuratism, and eventually he finds his color fields. But then I saw someone walk in through the exhibition backwards, and they just are standing in front of one of his iconic color fields, and that person's crying, right? And to me, like, that emotion is as valid as you or me or whoever who's gone through the entire journey of trying to intellectually process the entire, you know, kind of artistic career of Mark Rothko, because in the end, if it gives you emotion, that's all that matters, because emotion is the most valuable thing on the world, right? And so I kind of feel as if that's what I like about the UJ1 also. No one necessarily needs to know what it's about, but if you look at it, and my God, when you look at it from the back of that watch, it is just mesmerizing, right? You know, the way that the tourbillon cage is moving in these like 1 minute increments, 1 second increments. It's just so mesmerizing, right? And I feel as if that one person that really had that experience was your photographer, Ellen von Unwerth, right? So talk to me about, Ellen von Unwerth is like one of the most iconic fashion photographers of all time, but she was not a watch person when she started this at all. So how was that journey for her, Alex?
Yeah, well, I think one of the bad habits that the watch industry learned from the art world is this sense of gatekeeping. And I think that, in art, it's often around art history and understanding the entire linear progression of how you got to Rothko, how you started and where you are. The painting is emotionally resonant and it means something, and you don't have to have any background knowledge to understand that. I think the same is true of watches. I think the gatekeeping is often around the engineering, because I think so many of these companies are engineer-led and led by men who that's the thing that they're attracted to and that is resonant with them. But our goal was, how do we bring what is so special about these watches to audiences that love different things about them? So whether you love the decoration, whether you love the design, whether it's more like a love of jewelry than it is the engineering, or whether it's the history, or whether it is in fact the escapement and the movement and the engineering. I think what we're trying to do is say all of those are valid. So we enlisted Ellen von Unwerth because we wanted to create imagery of the watches and of the watchmaking on people's wrists, with them enjoying them. We're sort of two separate things. In the watchmaking, we wanted to show the people who make the watches and the process in this way that felt fresh and beautiful. And then we wanted to have this portrait series that we call Time Well Spent, that focuses not so much on the watch, because keeping time is important, but spending time is more important. So we look at how people who we think are interesting spend time. But the first thing we did with Ellen was we went to the factories where the watches are made. We went to our atelier in Biel. We went to the dial factory. We went to the Broadbeck engine turning factory. And Ellen was truly just awed by seeing how much craft, how much humanity, what went into it, how passionate the people who made them are about making every part of them. And I think that she liked watches, but didn't have a particular love of watchmaking. She kept walking around the factory saying, why does this only exist in Switzerland? People in France, people in America, everybody wants to do things with their hands. Everybody wants to learn these kinds of skills. It was really an interesting experience, but it was fun to see her experiencing each piece of this and understanding what goes into making a handmade watch. And I think the joy and the wonderment that she felt going through those spaces comes through in the images that she created. And our hope is people who know what a watch atelier looks like will see those and enjoy them. But people who've never thought to explore that, or never thought about what a watchmaker does, or what a 100-year-old Rose engine looks like, will see those and experience some joy in them.
It's really nice. I remember a meal we had. I think, was it last year, William? Right, and I think that Alex was kind of just coming into the watch industry. I remember it being cold, right, outside. So I feel it was either the beginning of this year or last year. And was it the beginning of this year? Was it before Watches and Wonders? I can't remember.
It was right before Watches and Wonders. It was the day before Watches and Wonders,
okay,
if I'm correct.
So it is really interesting to me, Alex, because I remember this meal that you, me, and William had, and with your dad and some other people, just before Watches and Wonders, right? Which was it April earlier this
March this year.
I'm getting everything wrong, but March earlier this. I remember it being very cold.
Actually, it was April 1st. It launched on April 1st this year,
right?
Because April 2nd was Trump Day, and the dinner was March 29th.
So what is really cool to me is that, like, at the time, it felt like you were just entering into the watch industry, right? Now, not that, far from where we started, it feels like you're part of it, right? Like, I mean, do you feel you're a part of it?
I feel that I'm incredibly grateful because people like you, Wei, and William have welcomed me into it. I don't think of myself as an expert. I think there's a tremendous amount I don't know and I need to learn. But what I remember about that dinner is it was the night before the first time we were ever going to present the watches to anybody that wasn't our family in Kari. And we were nervous. I was very nervous about that. I was nervous to explain them. I was nervous to answer questions from extremely knowledgeable watch journalists, knowing that I'm an outsider to the watch world, knowing that I don't have decades of knowledge in these very technical matters. And what was remarkable about that dinner to me was the two of you and Kari were so incredibly kind and reassuring. And I hope it's okay that I say this, but both of you said, "Oh, we understand you're nervous. We'll drop by tomorrow to check in on you." And you both did, and it meant a huge amount. So the watch world that can seem very rarefied and technical, and it's really a human industry full of people who've been really kind and wonderful. So I'm just very grateful to start being a part of it.
Well, we're both very proud to have you be part of it too. And the more cool people that we can bring into this industry, the happier we are. Would you agree, William?
I absolutely agree. The bigger the family, the better.
Absolutely. And I think William and I, our one word of advice to you was just be yourself. And you were great, you know? Well, on that note, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for joining us on After Hour, the podcast that is associated with Man of the Hour, my episodic television series on the Swiss watch industry. Thank you both so much for being part of the Urban Jürgensen episode, our wonderful episode that was shot both in Los Angeles and in Bienne as well. It was a great experience from my perspective, and you're both incredibly cool guys. So Alex, thank you for you and your dad and for Kari for what you've done in resurrecting this extraordinary brand. And William, thank you for being a recurring character throughout this show. You bring a great sort of dimension to it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wei, for all the support and all the kindness. It means a lot to all of us.
After Hours is brought to you by The Hourglass. The Hourglass is the ultimate showcase for artisanal independent brands and watchmakers such as Daniel Roth, François-Paul Journe, MBNF, and Recep Recep'i. Visit one of their 70 boutiques across 15 cities in the Asia Pacific or learn more at thehourglass.com.